Hi, everybody. Welcome to Facebook Live today with the Vitality Project. I'm Dr. Bob, and I'm here with my dear friend, Angela McLeod.
Hi, everybody.
It's wonderful to have you here, Angela.
Here.
We're coming to the end of a long arc here. It's the better part of a year. I'm thinking of it as a year because it was starting last August that I began to create daily posts. And we formally announced the Vitality Project in January this year. And then in March, COVID hit. So it's been an interesting year for sure. We've been offering the Vitality Project pro bono for free since March, and plan to continue to do so moving forward. And Jason, my creative partner here at the Vitality Project, as you know, he and I are actively engaged in sketching out what the next year is going to look like, as well as even the next few months, including a workshop that we're working on right now that will be planned for July, and new daily posts under a new banner, under a new title, all of that. And so it's time for kind of like taking stock of the last year. And this last series of posts have been not only around the topic of dealing with the shadow, which you and I just discussed in our shared Vitality Project group, as well as skillful means for managing shame. We've talked about this in terms of internalized shame, cultural stigma. The context has been talking about addiction and recovery, but it's not limited to any particular kind of addiction. And I think in the spirit of all of our conversations, Angela, we've been talking about recovering our whole lives, recovering our best selves. And so in this way, the invitation is to all to consider this. And our final topic for today, which represents the final post of so-called Rolling Out of Bed with Dr. Bob, is about how to continue what it is we've been working on, specifically how to continue to deepen self-compassion. So I'd like to spend a few minutes with you this morning, gleaning any reflections that you have and sharing some kind of closing notes for this dispensation. We'll be taking a break from daily posts, new posts, for the next few days until July 1st, and then we'll begin the new series. And so we're kind of right on the cusp of the end of a semester, so to speak, and the beginning of a new one. And I couldn't be happier to be hosting this than with you, Angela.
Yeah, likewise.
Yeah. So any thoughts that you have on this topic for today? How to continue to deepen self-compassion? Be very interested.
Yeah, I'm sure you have ideas too on that topic. It seems like a really great one to end on, or to end this section of what we've been doing. Well, I am really a big fan of what I call a daily practice. And, you know, some people think of that as a spiritual practice, or it could just be a self-care. But really the emphasis on whatever it is that I feel or identify that I need to be doing on a daily basis, that where I can tune into what's really happening and then respond to that. Now, sometimes for me, it's been helpful. I mean, it is helpful that there's certain things that I do, meditative things that I do, physical exercises, qigong, but really it keeps evolving and changing depending on what it feels important to me, that there's a sense of aliveness. So I think in the past, I thought it would be really wonderful if I meditated exactly the same way every day for the same amount of time for a long time, and that would somehow be this huge accomplishment and take me to some new, you know, level of abilities or something. And that's just not how it goes for me. I find there's some kind of a balance between letting my practices evolve and change and be responsive to what I'm needing. And there's something about having a certain amount of discipline and, you know, sticking with certain things to get the value. For me, that I'm just describing how I see a daily practice, and it can be different for everyone. But I really feel like that connects with this idea of deepening self-compassion, because for me, it's not just a one-time thing to be compassionate for myself, that it's something that I have to cultivate. And for a while I wondered, well, why is that? Isn't it sort of a natural thing to feel kindness and compassion? And, isn't this a part of what it is to be a human being? But as I've studied the nervous system,
good.
I want to bring that in because I think I even actually learned this from you, or heard this from you first, that compassion and kindness and those kind of qualities of being human are actually higher brain functions. They're part of our higher brain, or our more developed brain, frontal cortex. So if I'm in a chronic fight or flight mode, if I'm chronically stressed, if I'm frozen or depressed on a chronic, in a chronic mode, I'm not going to have very much access to compassion, kindness, and peace and clear thinking. And so for me, that has been really important, to get a little bit of an understanding of how my nervous system is working, the physiological level, and finding ways to work with that, to shift that state to where I have access to compassion. And I think I don't really know statistically, but I have the sense that a lot of us in recovery, a lot of people who've dealt with addiction, might also have this chronic stress, anxiety, chronic depression mode. I've heard a lot of people mention that. So that could be something worth looking into, as far as, learning to daily work with your state, and whether it's through physical practices, meditation, prayer, all these things that we've been talking about, and that you've brought through the Vitality Project.
Yeah, thank you, Angela. There's so much richness in all that you've talked about. I'd love to respond to you, then encourage your further thoughts. The last piece, you remind me of the work that, among others, Jon Kabat-Zinn at Harvard has done this work, at Massachusetts General Hospital. Richard Davidson's been doing this work for the last few decades at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. Daniel Siegel's doing this work at UCLA with the Mindful Awareness Research Institute. And those are just three examples that come to mind that here in the US, in academic institutions, are tracking the impact of regular self-regulation practices like mindfulness, and that you can lower your baseline stress level definitively in a surprisingly short period of time, and in a permanent way, as long as you're able to maintain the practice. It's really quite extraordinary. It doesn't take years of practice. It takes a few weeks of practice to actually have statistically significant lowering of your baseline stress levels. And so whether the stress manifests as anxiety or depression or PTSD or attentional problems or addictive behaviors, it doesn't matter. It's moving in the right direction for sure. So that's an encouragement, it seems like to me. I pull this book off the shelf from time to time by Sharon Begley, Train Your Mind, Change Your Brain, that we can actually change our brain structurally within a relatively short period of time. And if we're able to sustain, like you're suggesting, practices, that we can actually incorporate those to where that becomes our new body, our new brain. I think that's pretty amazing to me.
Yeah.
There's another piece that I wanted to respond to, with something you said earlier, and synchronistically it ties in with a post that was on Facebook this morning. She likes to be called Cara Bear. Cara Durant, out of South Africa, as you know, has joined us here at the Vitality Project, and vice versa with her initiative, Lockdown, Open Up, which is an extraordinarily creative enterprise, I think. And she wrote this morning in response to Jeremy, whose optimal self is also a relative, we're like a sister institution to that, with the common denominator being Jason Reno, the creative director here at the Vitality Project. Cara wrote in response to a presentation by Jeremy at Optimal Self. He was talking about fear, and she was talking about how it is that fear is kind of public enemy number one, so to speak, of our well-being, and including of our capacity to be loving towards one another. And so I responded just briefly today, very much in the spirit of what you're saying, is that our access to creativity and to personal productivity and to compassion is very much a function of how well regulated our midbrain kind of emotional center is relative to the expression of our creativity, relative to the expression of our caring for others, and that's very much mediated through the frontal cortex, through the front part of our brain. And without reducing love to the frontal cortex, because I know neither you nor I do, you can look at what parts of the brain need to be operative for that to be functional, and it takes the frontal cortex. I'll oftentimes give the example, and I have here before, that you can take the most moral person that you know, including yourself, and under the influence of extreme addictive behaviors, the frontal cortex just goes offline, which means we don't have access to the things that make us moral. Not the least of which is loving kindness. And so all of this to say, really support what you're saying, how it is that in one way of looking at it, love has a relationship of kind of reciprocal inhibition of fear and vice versa. Fear will shut down my love response. Love has the possibility of transcending my fear response, but it takes working that, especially habitually, to create a baseline of being maybe more consistently or reliably compassionate, both towards others and towards ourselves.
Yeah, beautifully put.
Thank you, thank you.
One other thing that came up, and when I contemplated this topic is, and I'm glad I remembered it because I forget it frequently, but I don't know where I've heard this before, but when I'm having a hard time feeling compassion for myself, I ask myself, how would I treat a beloved friend or a child who's having the experience that I'm having? And almost always, when I remember to do that, there's some kind of a shift that happens for me. And I just feel like that's been really helpful, especially when I'm in the midst of difficulty. You know, when I am a little bit shut down or disconnected from how to take care of myself well. So that's been really helpful. And
I love that image. You've shared that with me before in our conversations, and probably here. It's wonderful to find some kind of anchor for actually like a concrete reminder, a mnemonic for how would I treat others, a young child, another person, and then what would it be like to treat myself that way, or this person that way? The derivative of that I've shared with you before is that oftentimes in groups I'll share, can you guys imagine what I looked like when I was 6 years old? Which in my case is 60 years ago. And it's come to me over the years where I can look at somebody. I thought of you this way, Angela. I can picture you as a little girl. And it's meant honorifically. I don't mean it anything other than just respect and honor, but it's like a way to evoke a compassionate appreciation for another person. Because there's a universal kind of tug on the human heart when you think of the vulnerability and the innocence and the raw potential of little Angela and little Bobby.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, so then the only other thing that came up for me was, since we've been talking a lot about the shadow, was just the idea of turning towards that which is difficult. And so making a choice to do that. And I think there's a tendency for a lot of us, I know for me, especially in early recovery, where you know, being in addiction, it was like the opposite. I would keep wanting to turn away from difficult stuff, you know. So in recovery, it's like, okay, now you have to face everything. You have to clean up everything. Well, my goodness, you know, let's be gentle with that, you know. And so for me, I try to hold the idea of, okay, let's keep turning toward, but let's be gentle and just take it in little increments with help, you know, like, you know, with trusted others. And I have to keep reminding myself that, because there's something, maybe it's part of our conditioning, our culture, do it all by yourself. You need to be punished now, you know, that kind of thing. So compassion, even with the hard stuff.
I love the way that you put it, and I've learned this Angela, is to take it gradually, to take it slowly, and to not be afraid to reach out for help. That is so much a blind spot for me habitually, has been in my life, to forget that I can reach out for help. I think I incorporated too much self-reliance early on, and I've continually had to kind of modify that gradually over time. And it'll be a work in progress for me across the rest of my lifetime, for sure. I like that very much. Yeah. You know, you and I have talked about this, including between ourselves, about that there's value to kind of determination, you know, and, you know, kind of perseverance. Sometimes the term is used, grit, you know, like the recovery requires all of those qualities: grit, determination, and perseverance. And there's a way that that's true, but in the spirit of our both and sensibility between you and me, Angela, is that's true, and so is patience and gradual process and self-compassion. I've really learned this, and it's come on board in the last, I want to say just the last couple of years. I just feel like it's increasing, so it feels like it's the last couple of years, but in the last decade of my own recovery process, I really continue to feel the increase, and I monitor it, or it's almost like it monitors itself, because it'll come up for me most every day, where in the past I might have been impatient with myself, or judged myself, or shamed myself. I was very vulnerable to that my entire life. And I can still do that. But what I'm struck by is how much more frequent is the response of self-compassion. It's just like, oh, I think you and I've talked about this. I'm in conversation right now with a group out of India that's going to be filming it's going to be a movie about forgiveness, and they've asked for me to be one of the speakers in the film.
Oh, beautiful.
And yeah, I'm really, I just was in communication with them yesterday. And what I was aware of, or what I am aware of, is that I don't know that I want to do any more preparation than I already have been for the last 10 years, because I'd like to speak from my heart. And just what I just said is from my heart, is the fruit of self-compassion practice. For me, it's in the form of forgiveness practice out of the Buddhist traditions. Practicing that as regularly, nearly daily, as I have for the last 10 years, it's actually transformed me at a cellular level, so that now the reflex, much more often than not, is of self-forgiveness, self-compassion, patience, and so on. And on a bad day, and I do have bad days, I can be hard on myself, but I have a lot more good days. And that feels like such a grace that's come through this work for me. And you mentioned it at the very beginning. It takes regular, at least it did for me, took regular visitations of these themes of self-judgment. And is there a way to just drop through that into a place of loving the little boy Bobby, the grown man Bob? And I'm kind of like a case study in how effective that is, because I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And I'm so grateful for that. It makes it so much more joyous to live inside my skin. So, yeah. Any final thoughts as we begin to wind down for today?
Well, thank you so much, you and Jason, for putting the Vitality Project together and letting it evolve. And it's just been a blessing in my life, and I'm excited to see where it goes next. So
thank you. Angela, right back at you, in the sense of your contributions have been constant before the emergence at every step of the way, both before, during, and now as we kind of wrap up this first year. It began brewing late last spring, and the first contributions began in late last summer, which we're moving quickly towards. And its public kind of debut, we did pilot testing through the fall last year. You were part of the beta testing, and a growing group evolved up until the formal, kind of the public announcement in January. We announced it right at the beginning of the new year. But it's been a year as a process, with a lot of honing and learning through trial and error,
Uh-huh.
and including this current technology.
Yeah.
And I'm just grateful for your presence. I feel very supportive of all that you offer. And I know I've talked about it before, and we'll talk about it again in terms of the quality of presence you bring, the skills that you bring, the offerings that you bring for others who would want to collaborate with you, all of that. And I only imagine that getting clearer and more refined for both you and me and the Vitality Project over the last year. It's a very happy coupling that I have between what we're doing at the Vitality Project and all that you're doing. And I don't separate you out from the Vitality Project because to me, you're central to the family that has created this whole thing. So thank you for being my co-creator from basically day one. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And thank you for allowing me to be a part of the process.
Yeah. For all that are watching us, this kind of is a symbolic ending of one epoch in terms of rolling out of bed with Dr. Bob. Jason, we picked this day, this time. We have 250 posts that we've done over the past, which is many more days than not, as you can figure, you can do the math on that. And we're going to continue. We're going to pick up in about a week and a half. We'll be picking up with a new series that will be looking at what we hope to be really healing ideas or thoughts that will help to free you and me and people that we love. And we'll be continuing in the same vein. It'll have an enriched component because we'll be adding to our ongoing posts then monthly workshops in which we'll have very much interactive, like you and I are interacting, Angela. The goal would be to utilize technology. We have people joining us from all over the planet. The goal would be to have very interactive workshops, at least monthly. And then that information will filter into, for sure, and be informed by the daily posts. And we'll continue growing our discussion group online, which is available. We want to encourage anybody who's watching this that hasn't to please join as a member of the Vitality Project. There's no fee for it. It's just a matter of joining. It opens up resources, not the least of which is what Angela and I just came from, which for me is, like you and I talked about yesterday, it's an incredibly meaningful part of my weekly rhythm. We have groups that meet on Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings right now. I think it's going to be shifting slightly schedule-wise, and Jason will be announcing that in upcoming Facebook Live events over the next week. But we'll have at least 2 Vitality Project meetings that are private, and they're available to members, again, at no fee, where we really support each other with very specific concerns that come up, very much in the spirit of all else here at the Vitality Project. And so we would love to have you all join the Vitality Project. Your support is very much appreciated. It doesn't involve you paying anything. It involves you paying attention, and contributing is great. So as we emerge into the new year, it's going to be a joy. I'm looking forward. I'm as curious about it and excited about the possibilities as I believe you are, Angela. So it's fun to imagine. Yeah, thank you, Angela. Thank you for giving your time again today. I really appreciate it. I wish you a blessed weekend. I really wish you a good weekend, and all who joined us. All who joined us. May all of us have a restorative weekend, rest and peace, safety and health and well-being, and we'll pick up again next week. Okay.
All right.
Take good care, everybody. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.